The Voth Empire had crushed hundreds of worlds, slaughtering billions, until they fucked with the wrong planet, Earth. Henry Bell gripped the armrests of his cargo ship, the Phantom, as the gargantuan Voth battlecruiser eclipsed his viewport. "What in God's name is that?" Henry shouted, his eyes blinking rapidly at his scanner screen. The tiny green dot representing his vessel was dwarfed by a massive red blotch. "Attention, unidentified craft. This is Commander Uko of the Voth Imperial Navy." A bulbous grey face filled Henry's displays. "Your ship is now property of the Voth Empire. Comply with docking instructions and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with immediate incineration." Henry's hands trembled as he guided the Phantom into the looming hangar bay of the alien warship. He stepped out onto polished deck plating, a dozen Voth soldiers aiming plasma rifles at his skull. Uko's uniform glinted with medals as he stepped forward to inspect the captive human. Henry spat on Uko's boot. "Fuck you, we'll never surrender. Humanity will fight to the last breath before bowing to alien scum like you." Uko jammed his knee into Henry's gut. "Then the last breath of your species will be a scream. We'll raise your cities. Billions will die as an example to the rest of the galaxy. None defy the Voth." As pain lanced through his abdomen, Henry glimpsed a console on the far wall of the hangar. A ship roster showing vessels coming and going from the battlecruiser. If he could get a message out, warn the Terran defense fleet. Humanity's survival depended on it. The Voth invasion had to be stopped. No matter the cost, Henry had to escape this ship alive, or the human race was doomed to join the extinct civilizations, crushed beneath the Voth Empire's ruthless boot. Henry's mind raced as the Voth soldiers hauled him to his feet. He had to find a way to escape, to warn Earth of the coming onslaught. His eyes flicked around the hangar bay, desperate for anything he could use to his advantage. Then he saw it, a small shuttle tucked away in the corner, its hatch slightly ajar. A plan formed in his mind, risky but possible. During the brief tour of the ship, Henry had managed to memorize the layout of key areas. He knew that a shift change was coming up soon. It was his only chance. As the Voth guards dragged him towards the brig, Henry suddenly stumbled, feigning a trip. The moment their grips loosened, he wrenched free and bolted for the shuttle. Plasma blasts sizzled past him as he slammed his fist into the hatch controls. The door hissed open, and Henry dove inside, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The engines thrummed to life, just as the Voth soldiers reached the shuttle. Henry punched the thrusters, the acceleration crushing him back into the seat as the tiny craft shot out of the hangar bay. "This is Henry Bell of the Terran cargo vessel Phantom," he shouted into the comm system, hailing on all UEDF frequencies. "Earth is about to be invaded by the Voth. I repeat, the Voth are coming." Static crackled in response. Henry tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Unbeknownst to him, a cloaked Voth spy drone had intercepted his transmission, relaying it back to Commander Uko on the battlecruiser's bridge. Uko slammed his fist onto the arm of his command chair, the metal denting under the force of his rage. "That human dares defy us. Accelerate the fleet. We'll crush their pitiful planet before they have a chance to mount a defense." Light years away, Henry's warning finally got through to UEDF command. But instead of the immediate action he expected, he was met with skepticism and disbelief. "A single man in a stolen shuttle claiming an alien invasion? It's preposterous," scoffed General Alistair Graves, shaking his head at the flickering hologram of Henry. "We can't mobilize our entire defense force based on such flimsy evidence." Henry's jaw tightened as he watched the UEDF leadership debate and deliberate, precious time slipping away. He knew he had to take matters into his own hands. Reaching out to old friends and contacts within the UEDF, Henry began to gather a small group of loyal officers and civilian volunteers. They met in secret, poring over star charts and intel reports, trying to predict where the Voth might strike first. Henry divided them into teams, each tasked with fortifying a key location or developing unconventional strategies to counter the alien technology. As the Voth fleet drew ever closer to Earth's solar system, Henry and his makeshift resistance worked tirelessly, racing against the clock to prepare for the incoming storm. But with each passing day, Henry grew more frustrated with the inaction of Earth's leaders. He knew that unless he could find a way to convince them of the imminent danger, all their efforts might be for naught. As the Voth fleet emerged from the inky blackness of interstellar space, their cloaking devices flickered and sputtered, the unique radiation from Earth's sun interfering with the advanced technology. Uko's eyes widened as he realized their greatest advantage had been stripped away, leaving them exposed to Earth's sensors. On Earth, alarms blared as the Voth ships appeared on the UEDF's early warning systems. Generals and politicians alike scrambled to their stations, Henry's warnings now confirmed, beyond any doubt. The once skeptical leadership now galvanized into action, mobilizing their forces to defend their homeworld. Uko, his face twisted with rage, slammed his fist into the arm of his command chair. "Launch the first strike. We may have lost the element of surprise, but we will still bring these primitives to their knees." The Voth ships opened fire, their weapons targeting Earth's major population centers. But Henry and his team had been working tirelessly, intercepting and decoding the alien targeting data. They relayed the information to the UEDF, allowing them to evacuate civilians and fortify key installations moments before the Voth's devastating assault began. The ground shook and buildings crumbled under the onslaught, but the damage was not as severe as it could have been. Earth's defenses held, denying Uko the swift victory he had anticipated. The Voth regrouped, preparing for a second wave, as Henry and his team raced against time to uncover any weaknesses in the alien technology. In the stolen Voth stealth shuttle, they pored over the ship's systems, analyzing every component. Suddenly, a shout of triumph echoed through the makeshift lab. They had found a vulnerability in the Voth's energy shielding, a critical flaw that could turn the tide of the battle. But their elation was short-lived. The base's alarms blared, warning of an incoming threat. A Voth infiltration unit had breached the perimeter, their weapons cutting through the human defenses like a hot knife through butter. Henry and his team found themselves locked in a desperate struggle for survival, the price of their knowledge paid in blood. As the smoke cleared, Henry surveyed the grim scene. Several of his closest friends and allies lay dead or wounded, the cost of their discovery all too evident. But there was no time to mourn, no time to rest. The battle for Earth was only just beginning, and Henry knew that their newfound knowledge might be humanity's last hope for survival. In the makeshift command center, Henry's fingers flew across the keyboard as he analyzed the Voth shield schematics. His eyes widened as the realization hit him, a vulnerability, a chink in their seemingly impenetrable armor. He leapt to his feet, the chair clattering behind him as he rushed to share his discovery with the UEDF leadership. "I have a plan," Henry declared, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "If we can infiltrate the Voth's command ship and upload a virus into their systems, we can disable their shields. It'll give our forces a fighting chance." General Graves leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "That's a hell of a risk, son. Who do you propose we send on this suicide mission?" Henry met the general's gaze unwavering. "I'll do it. I'm the one who escaped their ship. I know the layout, the systems. It has to be me." As the UEDF prepared for Henry's infiltration, Earth's forces engaged the Voth in a series of guerrilla attacks. Fighters darted in and out, striking at the enemy's flanks, before disappearing into the clouds. The Voth, momentarily distracted, turned their attention to swatting these gnats, unaware of the greater threat lurking in the shadows. Amidst the chaos of battle, a lone Voth fighter spiraled out of the sky, trailing smoke and flames. It crashed in a remote field, the impact sending shockwaves through the earth. UEDF scouts, ever vigilant, raced to the scene, weapons at the ready. As they approached the wreckage, a figure stirred within the twisted metal. A Voth pilot, his once pristine uniform stained with blood, crawled from the shattered cockpit. The scouts trained their weapons on him, fingers hovering over the triggers. The scouts exchanged wary glances, but something in the pilot's eyes gave them pause. They lowered their weapons, cautiously approaching the wounded alien. He coughed, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. The scouts leaned in closer, hanging on his every word. The command ship, the Voth leadership, they are vulnerable, overconfident. If you strike now... The pilot shuddered, his eyes losing focus. The resistance... We can help. We can... His words trailed off as the light faded from his eyes, his body going limp. The scouts stood in stunned silence, the weight of the pilot's revelations hanging heavy in the air. They gathered the intel, the precious gift of a dying alien, and raced back to UEDF command. As Henry prepared to embark on his mission, the news of the Voth resistance reached the leadership. They gathered in a tense meeting, debating the merits and risks of this unexpected development. "Can we trust this information?" one general asked, skepticism etched on his face. "It could be a trap, a ploy to lure us into a false sense of security." Another leaned forward, her eyes alight with possibility. "But if it's true, if there are Voth who oppose the invasion, we could have allies on the inside. It could change everything." Henry listened to the arguments, his mind racing. The prospect of an alliance, of not facing this threat alone, was tempting. But the clock was ticking, and every moment spent deliberating was a moment the Voth used to strengthen their hold on Earth. He stood, his voice cutting through the chatter. "We stick to the plan. I'll infiltrate the command ship, plant the virus. If the resistance is real, if they can help, then let them prove it. But we can't afford to wait." The room fell silent, the weight of Henry's words sinking in. The UEDF leadership exchanged glances, the decision hanging in the balance. The fate of Earth, of humanity itself, rested on the outcome of this one, daring mission. Henry strode from the room, his jaw set with purpose. He had a job to do, and nothing, not even the tantalizing promise of an alien resistance, would deter him from his course. The future of his species depended on it. Henry's heart pounded as he guided the captured Voth stealth shuttle towards the looming alien command ship. His fingers danced across the unfamiliar controls, sweat beading on his brow as he maneuvered the craft into the docking bay. The shuttle settled onto the polished deck with a gentle thud, and Henry took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. Suddenly a burst of plasma sizzled past his head, scorching the wall beside him. Henry dove for cover as Voth security forces emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on his position. He returned fire, his stolen Voth plasma rifle humming in his hands. The firefight was brutal, close-quarters combat that pushed Henry to his limits. He ducked and weaved, his reflexes tested with each searing blast. The acrid smell of burning metal filled his nostrils as he pressed forward, dispatching the Voth guards with grim efficiency. As he delved deeper into the bowels of the ship, the resistance intensified. Voth soldiers seemed to materialize from every corner, their numbers endless. Henry's muscles burned with fatigue, his breaths coming in ragged gasps, but he couldn't stop, couldn't rest. The fate of Earth depended on him. Rounding a corner, Henry froze. Before him stood a group of Voth, their weapons raised. But something was different. Their uniforms lacked the typical Voth insignia, and they regarded Henry with cautious curiosity rather than hostility. "Hold your fire," one of them said, stepping forward. "You're not Voth. Who are you?" Henry lowered his weapon slightly, his heart racing. "I'm Henry Bell from Earth. I'm here to stop the invasion." The Voth exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "We are the resistance," the leader said. "We've been fighting against the Empire's tyranny from within." Henry's eyes widened. The Voth resistance, here on the command ship. He quickly explained his mission, the plan to upload the virus and disable the Voth's shields. The resistance fighters listened intently, their expressions hardening with resolve. "We'll help you," the leader said. "Together we can end this war." Henry nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. As they moved through the ship, the resistance fighters proved invaluable, their knowledge of the vessel's layout and security systems guiding them past countless obstacles. The bond between Henry and these unlikely allies grew with each skirmish, each narrow escape. They were united in purpose in the desperate fight for survival and freedom. On Earth, the UEDF leadership huddled around a secure comlink, their faces taut with anticipation. The Voth resistance leaders, their holographic forms flickering in the dimly lit room, spoke of their efforts to undermine the Empire's war machine. "We've sabotaged supply lines, disrupted communications," one of them said. "But our numbers are few. We need your help to truly make a difference." General Graves leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust you? Your people have slaughtered millions." The Voth leader met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because we too have lost. We've seen the destruction wrought by the Empire's greed. We fight for a future where our species can coexist peacefully with others." As the negotiations unfolded, a sudden transmission cut through the tense atmosphere. It was from Henry, his voice tight with urgency. "I've infiltrated the command ship," he said, his words punctuated by the sound of plasma fire. "I'm not alone. The Voth resistance is here, helping me, but we need backup. We need—" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. The UEDF leaders and Voth resistance fighters stared at each other, the gravity of the moment settling upon them like a leaden weight. The fate of Earth, of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance, and deep within the heart of the Voth command ship, Henry and his newfound allies fought on, their fates intertwined in the desperate struggle against an implacable foe. The sounds of plasma fire and screams of pain echoed through the corridors, as Henry and the Voth resistance fighters battled their way to the computer core. The elite guard, Uko's hand-picked warriors, fought with a ferocity that belied their disciplined exterior. Henry ducked and weaved, his stolen plasma rifle growing hot in his hands as he fired shot after shot at the advancing guards. Beside him, the Voth resistance fighters fell one by one, their blood splattering the walls and floor. Henry gritted his teeth, pushing forward through the chaos, determined to reach his goal. With a final burst of fire, he broke through the last line of defense and stumbled into the computer core. The room was bathed in an eerie blue light, the hum of the massive servers filling the air. Henry raced to the central console, his fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the virus upload. The progress bar crept forward, agonizingly slow. Henry spun around, his heart pounding. Uko stood before him, flanked by two heavily armed guards. The Voth commander's eyes gleamed with a cold fury as he leveled his plasma pistol at Henry's chest. "Did you think your little resistance could outsmart me?" Uko sneered. "I've known about their treachery for weeks. Even now my loyal soldiers are wiping them out, system by system." Henry's mind raced, his eyes flicking to the progress bar. He needed more time. "You're too late," he bluffed. "The virus is already uploaded. In minutes your shields will fail, and the UEDF will tear your fleet apart." Uko laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're lying, but it doesn't matter. Surrender now, and I'll grant you and your allies a quick death. Resist, and I'll make sure you live long enough to watch your world burn." Henry's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on his rifle. He couldn't give in, not now, not when they were so close. He had to keep Uko talking, distracted. "You're a fool, Uko," he said, his voice steady. "Even if you win this battle, you've already lost the war. The resistance will never stop fighting. They'll bleed your empire dry, one cut at a time." Uko's eyes narrowed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Brave words for a man about to die. Suddenly a burst of plasma fire erupted from the doorway. The Voth resistance fighters, battered and bloodied but still standing, poured into the room. Uko roared in rage, spinning to face the new threat. In that moment, Henry lunged for the console. His fingers danced across the keys, finalizing the upload. The progress bar flashed green, and a shudder ran through the ship as the virus took hold. But even as the Voth's shields fell, the resistance fighters revealed their final desperate gambit. "We've rigged this ship to blow," one of them shouted over the din of battle. "It's the only way to be sure, to cripple their fleet." Henry's eyes widened, his heart pounding. The virus was uploaded, but if the ship exploded now, the UEDF's advantage would be lost. He had to make a choice, and fast. Uko, realizing the danger, let out a roar of fury. He charged forward, his pistol spitting plasma at the resistance fighters. They fell, one by one, their bodies crumpling to the deck. Henry's finger hovered over the console, torn between his mission and his newfound allies. The countdown to detonation ticked away, each second an eternity. He had to choose, but either way, the cost would be high. In that moment, the fate of Earth, of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance, and Henry, the man who had started it all, now held the power to end it, one way or another. Henry crashed into Uko, grappling him with sweat-slicked hands as the virus upload progress bar crawled towards completion. They slammed against the computer console, sparks showering them. Uko snarled, his reptilian face contorted. He clawed at Henry's eyes, but Henry jerked his head aside. Around them, the Voth resistance fighters battled Uko's reinforcements in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Green blood splattered bulkheads as plasma knives slashed and bodies thudded to the deck. The close-quarters melee was savage, primal, filled with grunts of exertion and cries of pain. Henry drove his knee into Uko's gut, then hammered an elbow down on his spine. But the Voth commander barely flinched. He seized Henry's throat, his claws puncturing skin. Henry choked, black spots crowding his vision. "Even if you kill me, human, you've already lost," Uko rasped. He released Henry to tap a small device fused into his scaly temple. "My failsafe, linked to my vital signs. If they flatline, this whole ship goes up in flames. You and all your allies, you'll burn together." Henry staggered back, his tactical mind racing. He couldn't let Uko die, not yet. The virus still needed a few more seconds. The Voth's shields had to fall first, or the UEDF counterattack would never punch through. But once it finished uploading... Henry ducked a vicious swipe as Uko lunged at him again, talons extended. They crashed across the computer core in a storm of punches, blocks and chokeholds, locked in desperate struggle. Henry felt his strength flagging, his body battered and bloody. He was only human. Uko was a Voth, stronger, faster, more durable. Henry glanced at the progress bar. 98%, almost there. He just needed to hold on a little longer. Uko's backhand caught Henry across the jaw, hurling him against a bulkhead. Lights flashed in his skull. He tasted blood. Uko loomed over him, raising a taloned fist. "Play us over, human," Uko panted. "You lose." Henry saw the virus upload hit 100%. Complete. In the same instant, he heard the Voth resistance leader shout. Henry shoved himself to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "Get to the escape pods," he yelled back hoarsely. "I'll deal with Uko and meet you there." The resistance fighters hesitated. Henry whirled to face them, his expression fierce. "Go! That's an order!" Reluctantly, they disengaged from the remaining Voth guards and sprinted for the exit, the thunder of their boots fading rapidly. As they ran, explosions began to rumble through the ship, a chain reaction of sabotaged systems. Henry spun back to Uko as the ship trembled and alarms shrieked. The Voth commander crouched in a fighting stance, bleeding but far from beaten. Henry raised his fists, circling him warily. The virus was uploaded. The shields were down. His mission was complete. Now he just had to stop Uko from activating the failsafe and destroying the ship before the UEDF could launch their attack. Henry took a breath, tensed his muscles, and charged forward with a raw-throated battle cry, determined to finish this once and for all. Henry wrenched the failsafe device from Uko's claws, the Voth commander's eyes widening in shock and rage. Explosions rocked the command ship, flames erupting from ruptured conduits as the virus tore through its systems. Gritting his teeth, Henry jabbed his thumb onto the failsafe's activation switch. A robotic voice blared from hidden speakers. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. 5 minutes to detonation." Uko roared, lunging at Henry with murderous fury. They grappled, rolling across the buckling deck plates as the ship disintegrated around them. Girders crashed down, narrowly missing them. Smoke choked the air. Emergency lights flashed hellish red. Henry managed to kick Uko away and stagger to his feet. He had to get out, had to reach an escape pod. He sprinted for the corridor, leaping over twisted debris, the ship shaking itself to pieces. Uko's heavy footfalls pounded behind him. The Voth commander was relentless. driving forward through the apocalyptic destruction like an unstoppable force of nature. His eyes burned with primal hate as he closed the gap, talons grasping. 2 minutes to detonation, the robotic voice intoned. Henry reached the escape pod bay, slamming his fist into the release button. The hatch hissed open and he dove inside, frantically stabbing at the launch controls. Uko appeared in the entrance, framed by the raging inferno consuming the ship. He charged, a wordless snarl on his reptilian face. Henry braced himself as Uko crashed into the pod, sending them both tumbling. They wrestled, a tangle of straining limbs and gnashing teeth, as the pod's engines fired with a boom. The small craft shot out of the disintegrating command ship, hurtling into the void. Henry managed to get his hands around Uko's throat, fingers digging into leathery flesh. Uko thrashed and clawed at him, drawing blood. With a burst of desperate strength, Henry hauled the Voth commander off him and slammed him into the pod's rear hatch. He punched the release, the hatch blowing open. Uko's eyes widened in horrified realization. He scrabbled for a handhold, but Henry's boot crashed into his chest, sending him hurtling out into space with a fading scream of rage and despair. Henry collapsed against the side of the pod, gasping for breath as the hatch sealed shut again. He turned to the viewport just in time to see Uko's body dwindling to a dark speck against the command ship's hull. A second later, the ship detonated in a blinding flash. A sphere of silent fire bloomed, utterly consuming Uko and the remnants of his elite guard. Gobbets of molten metal sprayed in all directions as the shockwave slammed into Henry's escape pod, sending it tumbling end over end. On the bridge of the UEDF flagship, Admiral Graves watched the command ship's destruction with grim satisfaction. The Voth fleet, reeling from the loss of their shields and leadership, fell into chaos. Earth's forces, seizing the moment, struck with brutal efficiency. Plasma beams and missiles raked the disorganized Voth ships, tearing through unprotected hulls. The Voth resistance fighters, using stolen ships and sabotage, sowed even more confusion and disarray. It was a rout, the once mighty Voth armada crumbling before the vengeful onslaught of humanity and its unlikely allies. Henry, still spinning in his escape pod, could only watch the titanic space battle unfolding around him. The pain of his wounds faded away as a surge of elation and relief washed over him. They had done it. The Voth were broken. Earth was saved. But even as he savored the overwhelming emotions of victory, a small insistent part of Henry's mind warned him that this was not the end. The Voth Empire was vast, and Uko was but one commander. There would be others, seeking to finish what he had started. The war was far from over, but for now, in this moment, as the wreckage of alien ships burned against the starry backdrop of space, Henry let himself breathe. He closed his eyes, a ragged chuckle escaping his lips. They had won the battle. The fight for Earth, for the future of humanity, would continue, and he would be ready for it. The shockwave from the Voth command ship's destruction slammed into the surrounding vessels, the flash of light momentarily blinding sensors and view screens. The UEDF fleet, poised for this crucial moment, surged forward, their weapons locked onto the Voth's secondary command ships, the virus-compromised shields offering little resistance. On the bridges of the Voth ships, chaos reigned. The Voth resistance, seizing their chance, openly revolted. They stormed onto the command decks, energy blades and plasma rifles in hand. Loyal Voth crew fought back, the enclosed spaces echoing with the sounds of close-quarters combat. Aboard the UEDF flagship, Admiral Graves watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The Voth fleet was in disarray, their chain of command severed. UEDF ships pressed the attack, targeting vital systems and engines. Voth vessels began to drift, venting atmosphere and debris. Henry, cramped in his escape pod, felt the buffeting as UEDF tractor beams locked on. The pod shuddered as it was drawn into a hangar bay. The hatch hissed open, and he found himself face to face with a squad of UEDF Marines, exhausted, battered, but alive. Upon reaching Earth, Henry was swept up in a wave of celebration and media attention. He was lauded as the hero who had saved humanity, the man who had brought the mighty Voth low. Medals were pinned to his chest, his name spoken with reverence. But even as the celebrations reached their zenith, troubling whispers began to circulate. Fragmentary reports from deep space listening posts and long-range scouts spoke of Voth ships rallying around fanatical commanders. These rogue factions, refusing to accept defeat, were said to be marshalling their forces, vowing revenge against the upstart humans. Rumor had it that these Voth hardliners were not alone. Other species long crushed under the heel of the Voth Empire were flocking to their banner. The promise of retribution, of a chance to strike back at those who had humiliated their masters, was a siren call to those with old grudges to settle. As the UEDF and Voth resistance worked to cement their uneasy alliance and bring a lasting peace to the war-torn galaxy, Henry found himself increasingly uneasy. The spectre of renewed conflict haunted his thoughts. Late one night, in the quiet of his quarters, Henry pored over the data he had managed to extract from the Voth command ship. Fragmented records, historical archives, and cultural databases. He hoped to find some insight, some key to understanding the Voth psyche that might avert another war. As he sifted through the ancient records, a chilling pattern began to emerge, hints of a dark secret at the heart of the Voth Empire, a truth that cast a grim shadow over their expansion and conquest. The more he read, the more a sense of foreboding grew in his heart. He had set out to find a way to prevent another conflict, but now he wondered if he had stumbled upon something far more dangerous, a revelation that, if brought to light, might shatter the fragile peace and set the galaxy ablaze once more. Henry's finger hovered over the file, a sense of dread rising in his throat. Henry's finger trembled, millimeters from the file's glowing interface. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. He drew a steadying breath, steeling himself, and tapped the file. The holographic display sprang to life, bathing the room in an eerie blue glow. Ancient glyphs and symbols scrolled across the screen, their meaning obscured by the passage of eons. But as Henry watched, a pattern began to emerge. A map, hidden within the interlocking lines and curves. His eyes widened as he traced the paths, realization dawning like a cold sun. The Voth's power, their unassailable might, lay not in their ships or their weapons, but in something far older. A network of artifacts, scattered across the stars like cosmic breadcrumbs. The file spoke of their power, of their ability to bend reality to the will of the wielder. With all the pieces in hand, the Voth could reshape the very fabric of the universe. They could enslave entire galaxies, bend the laws of physics to their whim. Henry's blood ran cold as he read on. The true scope of the Voth's ambition laid bare. For centuries they had scoured the stars in secret, seeking these ancient relics. The conquest, the slaughter, it had all been in service of this single, terrible goal. Henry's fists clenched, his jaw tight with determination. He couldn't let that happen. Couldn't let the Voth's insatiable hunger unleash untold horrors upon the unsuspecting galaxy. He had to find the artifacts first, had to keep them out of the wrong hands no matter the cost, even if it meant sacrificing everything he held dear. Henry rose from his chair, his exhaustion forgotten as a new sense of purpose flooded through him. He gathered his notes, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. There was no time to waste. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and he, Henry Bell, the man who had already given so much, would have to give even more. As he stepped out into the corridor, a chime from his communicator broke the silence. "Henry," a familiar voice crackled, "we've got a situation. The Voth splinter factions. They're on the move, and they're not alone." Henry's grip tightened on the communicator, his knuckles white. The game was afoot, and the stakes had just gotten even higher. He took a breath, his voice steady as he replied, "Understood. Gather the team, we've got work to do." The static-laced voice of Admiral Graves filled the briefing room, his holographic form flickering in the dim light. "The situation is critical," he said, his brow furrowed. "Our intelligence suggests that the Voth splinter factions are closing in on the first artifact. We cannot allow them to claim it." Henry leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What's the plan, Admiral?" Graves' image shimmered as he brought up a star map, a glowing point pulsing red. "We've pinpointed the artifact's location, a remote, uncharted world on the edge of known space. You'll lead a small team, infiltrate the planet, and secure the artifact before the Voth can reach it." The assembled UEDF operatives exchanged glances, the weight of the mission settling upon their shoulders. These were the best of the best, handpicked by Henry for their skills and their unwavering loyalty. "It won't be easy," Henry said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "The Voth will be coming in force, and if the intel from the files is correct, they won't be the only ones seeking the artifact." A ripple of unease passed through the room. The thought of unknown ancient powers entering the fray was deeply unsettling. "But we have no choice," Henry continued, his gaze sweeping over his team. "If we fail, if the artifacts fall into the wrong hands, the consequences are unthinkable. We are the galaxy's last line of defense." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, with a nod to Graves, he spoke again. "Gear up. We leave in an hour." As the team dispersed to make their preparations, Henry found himself alone with his thoughts. The path ahead was fraught with peril, the odds stacked against them, but he had faced impossible odds before, had stared down the barrel of annihilation and emerged victorious. Henry's hand drifted to the small worn locket around his neck. Inside, a holographic image of his family flickered to life. His wife, his children, the ones he fought for, the ones he would gladly give his life to protect. He closed the locket, his resolve hardening like tempered steel. He would see this through, would ensure that his loved ones, that all the people of the galaxy would have a future free from the spectre of the Voth's insatiable ambition. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.